I'll paint out the sign, set where we began. I'm here once again, and I'm deep in the feeling of pain.
Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Today we have the honor of hosting James Paulson, a seasoned Navy pilot with a remarkable 30 plus years in the Navy. Join us as we dive into his experiences as a pilot and his current role as a designated pilot examiner and Chief Flight Instructor at Purdue University. Thank you so much for joining us, Jim.
Thanks for having me.
Jim and I actually first met on my check ride. He was my DPE, and so we had a great time up there, and I left with my license, so that's always nice.
You did good.
So with that, let's head into our first question. How did your journey in aviation begin, and what made you decide to join the Navy and pursue a career as a pilot?
Well, interestingly enough, my earliest memory is of a Navy blimp. And it had to have been in the late 1950s when I was about 2 years old or so. I was on the beach with my parents, apparently, and I was eating an ice cream cone, and a Navy blimp puttered by. And ever since then, I've loved naval aviation, and I've loved ice cream, and I just keep going with them forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah. When did you decide a pilot was the path for you?
I don't know if I ever made a conscious decision. I think I just figured I was going to. From the beginning, like I said, that was my earliest memory. Playing as a kid, I loved playing with airplanes, and I still build. I don't build. I collect model airplanes to this day. I have as much fun looking at those and imagine flying them as I do flying a real airplane. It's just been a lifelong hobby. Not many people are lucky enough to get paid to do their hobby, basically.
Yeah. So tell me a bit about your time in the Navy and your flying basically there.
Well, like you said, 30 years, they make you get out at 30. So that's the limit. Had always wanted to fly Navy, but in college, I had a strong Air Force influence here. A lot of my professors were Air Force, so I actually applied to both. Mm-hmm. And the Air Force accepted me first, and the Navy actually turned me down, which kind of motivated me to try harder for the Navy, and they ended up deciding they wanted me after all. Mm-hmm. So lucked out, and got to fly jets my whole career. As an airway commander, I got to fly the other equipment we have in the Navy, helicopters and turboprop planes and that type of thing, the early warning mission planes, the scout planes. But fighters has always been the thing, strike fighters as we call them nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just more of a fun question. What has been your favorite aircraft to fly in the Navy?
Definitely the F-18.
F-18.
All of them were fun. Everyone that I've ever flown was fun. But the F-18, it fits on like a glove. After the amount of time I have in them, you just think and it happens. It's kind of good.
Yeah. How many hours do you have around, if you don't mind me asking?
Over 10,000. I kind of stopped paying attention or stopped logging them. I have to log X amount a year for my DPE job, the designated pilot examiner job. But around 10,000 is just kind of stopped logging. More importantly to me, I have 1,000 carrier landings. That's a higher accomplishment as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. That's interesting. So you said you had to leave the Navy after 30 years, but what do you think were some of the biggest lessons or like differences of Navy for flying versus just general flying?
Well, there's nothing as exciting as flying around an aircraft carrier. It's thrilling. We jokingly call it the sport of kings during the daytime, and we call it the folly of fools at nighttime. Nighttime you never get used to. It's very hard work. Mm-hmm. You have to be very good, very precise. But the camaraderie is unlike anything the civilian world can duplicate. You're smart with a bunch of guys, both the maintainers and the radio room with the pilots in it. You all become like family. Do everything together, and you learn how everybody thinks. You know what a guy's going to do in the airplane just because you know him that well from flying with him so much. So that's probably the main difference.
Yeah, you kind of become a family with the people you fly with.
Mm.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. Could you share like one of your most striking experiences in the Navy?
Well, I told of one just the other day to someone who was asking the same question. I think one of the coolest things I'd done up to that point, one day on the carrier, my first deployment, we're crossing the Pacific, and the admiral wanted to see what was out there on the horizon. So he launched a whole bunch of us F-18s to just go straight out as far as we could. And so I launched it probably 5 o'clock at night or in the afternoon, and got 500 miles from the carrier. The sky went from blue to pink to eventually, pitch black. But it was magnificent solitude. 500 miles from anything, anybody, really remote.
Mhm.
That was quite the day. Then you get to come back for a night trap after
Yeah.
night carrier landing.
Mhm. So, after your career in the Navy, what made you interested in being an instructor in a DPE, and how did you get here from there?
I just kind of fell into it. I looked at maybe working for Purdue because I graduated from the program there, and I always thought about possibly going back to that program as an instructor. And I did a little bit of work in that regard there. But then I just kind of fell in over here at this hangar. They needed a chief pilot, and I was available. So I took the job on. Did that for a couple of years and established myself with the FAA once they got to know me. They thought I'd be a pretty good examiner, so they selected me to do that. So I get to do that now. And for me, this is paying back. I'm returning what aviation gave to me.
Yeah. You're helping a bunch of young people become pilots, and I think that's
absolutely.
pretty awesome. Yeah.
Yep, training the next generation. It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. So, as a DPE and an instructor in that sense, what do you find the most rewarding about your role? We already touched up on this, but
The most rewarding thing is watching that person's face when you tell them, "Congrats, you're a private pilot."
yeah,
It's fun seeing the smile.
yeah, and with being a DPE and an instructor, like I know there's a lot of responsibility that comes with it. So, how do you approach the responsibility that comes with like evaluating and like being in charge of, I guess, allowing others to fly?
Yeah. There's criteria, of course. They have to demonstrate they can do the thing properly, and when they don't demonstrate that, that's the hard part of the job. That's when you got to say, sorry, you don't pass. You need to go back and get some more training. The responsibility, I don't know. I've heard some people not want to do the job because they didn't want to be responsible for turning someone loose in an airplane who might go out and hurt themselves or hurt somebody else. I don't really understand that mentality, especially as someone who's ordered a whole bunch of guys to go into combat repeatedly, and that's got a much higher rate of people not coming back home. Fate is fate. I think the important thing is to give people the opportunity to do what they want to do. And if they end up getting hurt in the process, that's sort of their decision, but or their misfortune. But it's important for everyone to do what they want to do.
Yeah. So, what do you think would be one of the more crucial factors in ensuring like a safe career in aviation? Like,
I like to tell people on a regular basis that if you go flying in an airplane and you don't learn something, you need to reevaluate and reassess. I learn something just about every time I get into an airplane. And when you stop learning, when you think you've learned, you know all there is to know, and there are people out there like that. Those are the dangerous ones. Those are the ones who are going to get hurt.
Yeah, so it's like a lot about the mentality and just how you go into it.
Yeah. Always learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so actually, the interview with you was one of like the highly requested ones from the cadets, and so here are some of the ones that they asked me to ask.
Okay.
What advice would you give to a new pilot or someone considering military aviation?
Jump on in, the water's fine. There is no greater time to be entering aviation. I think getting into the military aviation right now might be a little bit more difficult because they just don't have the numbers that they can support. But I think anyone who's been in high school, ROTC, gotten their private license, entering college with the intent to join the military, has an excellent chance of getting into the cockpit.
Yeah.
So I would recommend it to the extent that you can, keep pursuing it. If that's not actually flying, there's other things you can do to keep your hand in aviation.
Yeah, and a few people asked, like they're really inspired by your journey in the Navy, and they were wondering if they were to enter the Navy or Air Force, like what would be some steps to take from now to, I guess, improve your chances additionally?
Okay, well, you need good grades, very good grades. You need to be good socially. You need to be, members of student government or clubs, social clubs, fraternities, sororities, that type of thing. They want to see a rounded person. It's vital that you are in good shape. If you don't have a workout routine now, you need to develop one for the rest of your life. I swim every morning, but you need to do something like that. Take care of yourself. Overindulgence in anything is dangerous. Drugs or food or even water. If you do too much of anything, it's going to hurt you. Displaying leadership, I think, is probably a big thing they want to see. So taking on roles like I was saying, in a fraternity, becoming the president of a fraternity, or any of the many social clubs that are out there, flying clubs. There's the flying ambassadors here that campus has. Developing your leadership skills and demonstrating that you have some leadership skills is going to be a huge factor in getting in.
Yeah, that's good advice. So thank you so much, Jim. That was our last question. Thank you so much for being part of the podcast and just sharing your journey with us. For our listeners, we hope you enjoyed our episode. So stay tuned for future episodes like this, and happy flying.